Hey friend, welcome back to the Tang Book Club. My name is Billy Chan. In this channel, we are going to talk about book, learning together and have fun together. Today, we are delighted to have Shin Chze. He is the recruitment marketing manager at Intel. And we are going to talk about the book Think Again by Adam Grant. Do remember to subscribe to this channel if you have not and enjoy this session.
Thanks, Billy, for the invitation and the introduction. So, in case you do not know me, hi, my name is Shin Chze. Probably 12 years here, people still mispronounce my name and misspell my name. It's okay. But today, I'm very glad to be invited by Billy. We have known Billy for years. I was also one of the few pioneers. I'm not say pioneers lah. Those that conducted the book club for some a few advocate, right?
Wanted to make people to learn even more and you can see the spark of passion within even he left MDC. He still said, Billy, you want to do something? Can I do this thing with the MDC society or not? I think thanks for that, Shin Chze.
Okay. So today it's all about Adam Graham lah. If you want to know me more, can contact me later, but I don't think you would. But before that, I really hope that this section is going to be a very interactive session instead of me just talking, right? I really hope that you all can participate in the chat. Oh, I see a lot of great good friends over here. Thanks for the support. Now, before I start, I'm not sure how many of you have really heard of Adam Grant. Just give a yes or no in the chat group so that I can roughly know the idea of the crowd that I'm talking to. If I see a lot of no, a lot of yes, well, a lot of message will resonate. If a lot of no means that there's an opportunity for me to talk, like quite a lot of people know, bring you a new perspective to your life. All right, looks like
Most of the managers should know, right? Because that was we invited him to speak for the manager sessions, right? Back then by Boss One, right?
oh, okay, means he's quite popular lah. Okay, but majority of them are no, because I guess that's normal because most of us are not managers. Hey, joke aside, I just try to make this more casual. Feel free to edit it, Billy, after your post production if I say anything wrong. Okay, right, I get it. Right, most of them don't have never heard of Adam Grant. So he's pretty popular in the space. He's a organization psychologist, right? Different from the clinical psychologists that you go for treatment of mental illness or mental challenge, right? So his mission or his work largely revolves around researching. Um, oh, some noise. Does it come from me? I don't think so, but it's okay. Yeah, Billy, you help me manage now, huh? Okay, so Adam Grant, if you Google him, he's a very famous professor from Wharton School of Business. He has spent probably most of his life researching about organization psychology. So his mission is to make work not suck, right? So if you really want to know more about him, feel free to follow him up with this TED Talk or even his podcast, right? But today we are going to talk about the book called Think Again. Let me just kind of share it. I have prepared some slides. So let me know if you can see it. Boleh kah?
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, all right, great. So this book is just being launched recently. I guess it was just a few months ago, but I have been an avid follower of Adam since his very first book, Give and Take, if I'm not mistaken. So if you have heard about him, he has published a few books. One is called Originals, where he talks about how creative idea came about. And in this book, he talks about Think Again, which is the power of rethink what you learn, and the power of knowing what you don't, right? Well, of course, you see, like, there's a recommendation by Bill and Melinda Gates. Sadly, they just got divorced recently, but the very reason why he got that advocate because he was involved in the Gates Foundation, trying to advise the Gates Foundation on some of their operation in terms of organization transformation. So this book, before I start, it's a very easy reading book. Billy, I'm not sure you agree with me or not. You just read it over the weekend, right?
Yes, I nearly finished.
Yeah. It's a very easy-going book.
Very easy.
When I say very easy-going, to give you a comparison, right? I'm not sure whether any of you have read works by Daniel Kahneman, Nicholas Taleb, right? So they can be quite, heavy, right? But Adam book has always been very easy reading. So first thought of the day is that this is not going to be a taxing book. It's a book written in very plain language that I'm sure all of you will be able to digest it easily, right? So this book, it's all about, if there's one concept, right, that you are going to walk away from this session today without even reading the book, it's about the mindset. So in this particular book, Adam talks a lot about why it is important for us to know what we do not know and rethink our position in a lot of decision made in our life and career. So in short, he summarizes our mindset into three main category: the preacher, the prosecutor, and the politician, right? So he said that a lot of us fall in the trap of thinking like a preacher, a prosecutor, or a politician. So let me just give you more examples about a preacher, prosecutor, and politician, and I shall kind of couple it with some of my personal examples, right? So when someone thinks like a preacher, it's very much like who you meet in a preacher, right? Be it a religious preacher or some other preachers. So your mindset will be focusing on telling people what you think it's right? So you will, like, for example, you are so engrossed into Bitcoin investing, right? And then all you see are the good things about Bitcoin. And then whenever you talk about investment, Bitcoin will always be like the best investment in the tool. So you will just preach whatever you know about Bitcoin to the majority of the crowd and try to dominate the conversation, right? The second mode, it's called prosecutor. So in this mode, right, a lot of times we will fall into the trap of trying to prove the other person wrong. So for example, if let's say you are not really into, let's take the pandemic for example, right? Let's say you are somebody that is anti-vaccine, right? I'm hope we don't have anyone here, but let's say you're somebody that is anti-vaccination, right? And then when the other person talks about the benefit of vaccination, you will find all the facts to prove he or she wrongs, because the so-called data that you collected, and all your aim is just to prove the other person wrong, right? So you're not really into. So the first mode, preacher, is like you're trying your best to prove that you are right. The second mode is that you're trying your best to prove the other person wrong. So you bring out all the stories that you heard over the internet to counterclaim the benefit of vaccine, right? So the third mode is something what we call the politician mode. I'm sure that a lot of you are very familiar with the politician mode. It's exhibited by our politician almost every day. So what this group of people does is that they will just sway their position to gain the support of the people, right? So for example, let's say, I'm just quoting an example, right? Let's say you are a manager in this organization. Probably when you talk to your subordinates in order to gain their favor, because a manager feedback is coming, then you will say something that makes sense and make them happy. But when you kind of talk to your upper management, you change the tune, right? You say that probably you talk about something that might not sound really great for your subordinates and your team, but it will sound good for your upper management. So the value and the mindset is not consistent over there, and you see a lot of references to politicians, because that's what they do, right? Because they want their best to gather the votes they can during an election. So you will see in multiple occasions, right? Like for example, in some of our country situation during the pandemic time, you see a different kind of perspective in some of our standard operating procedure of our movement control order and so on. So this type of people, do sway their position to gain support, to gain the liking of the people. Now, before I go, Billy, what mode do you think that you are in? Preacher, prosecutor, or politician? The most.
Good question. I think mostly will be preacher and prosecutor. I would say maybe bouncing between these two modes. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, how about the crowd? If you have identified a mode, I would love to hear from you. What do you think? Maybe maybe not one of these three, but if you think you are in one of these three mode, feel free to type in the comment. Let me know what you think. Anyone? At least a first impression of what do you think? Who do you think you are? Right? A
Just
preacher, a
just give
prosecutor,
just
a
give
politician.
example lah. It probably just now what you mentioned, Shin Chze, like
Yeah.
you say, like for vaccination lah. What where are you or something like that?
So I'll give you while we wait for more comment, right? I'll give you an example. I think I myself it's in the prosecutor mode, and that's not something to be proud of. Because during the book, right, you read a session where Adams talk about a student came to him for counseling, right? Because he's like a career guru, a career advisor. So the student came into him and asked him, like, should I study an MBA, if I remember correctly? And then I think Adam gave her tons of facts. And at the end of that discussion, that student just called Adam a logic bully. At first, Adam was very happy because he thinks that a logic bully means that he has all sorts of data supporting his argument, that he can kind of, make it to convince people of his argument, right? And then when she thinks about that, the student kind of gave the feedback that you give all the supporting fact that they are really great, but they kind of make me do not know how to respond, right? And I don't have a say in anything that you just mentioned. So I believe I myself is really in the prosecutor mode. I'm always being accused by my wife that sometimes I give tons of logic and facts into an argument that she's not happy about, but she just sometimes doesn't wish to continue the conversation. So I believe a lot of us are probably mostly in the preacher and the prosecutor mode because we are so firm into our belief, right? And I think this book, the main message is that we should all start to think like a scientist, right? What do you mean by think like a scientist? Remember when we used to do, probably none of us are scientists here, right? But when you think like a scientist, it means that if you remember we used to have like experiments at school, right? When you write experiments at school, you write like hypothesis one, and then what is the hypothesis, and then you do that experiment. Probably it's like planting or I don't know, chemical reaction and all that kind of stuff, and then you try to prove that hypothesis. So Adam's message is that instead of being in the preacher, prosecutor, and politician mode, when you kind of present a point of your own, try to think like a scientist. Treat the view as a hypothesis and test it with data. So, for example, let's say you think that you know uh, sending kids for preschool is the best way forward, or it probably is not the best way forward, right? So instead of holding that view and discounting all the other counter arguments that you see on that particular opinion, you should just treat that as a hypothesis that it's okay to change your position once you get more data validating what you have in the argument. So what he found out is that in this book, he quoted an example about an entrepreneur club where there are two groups of people. One group of people is being trained. I mean, two of them are being trained with the same training of being an entrepreneur, like how to start a business, how to raise fund, and etc. But one of the control group did nothing. The other control group was being taught on how to think like a scientist, right? And then how to, if you're very familiar with product management, you know the concept of minimum viable product, the MVP concept, where you come up with a product with the least amount of feature to test your hypothesis, right? So the other group was being cultivated with that kind of mindset. So then So the result, they found out that the other group that was being, tested with that kind of mindset definitely works very well. That they were able to change their position very fast, because a lot of times, especially for like preacher, right? Um, Preacher mode, right? Because we change our position. Sometimes the problem with us is that we tie our opinion with our identity. And a lot of times you hold into that opinion because you don't want to change your identity. And what Adam is trying to say is that we should never associate an opinion with your own identity. You should not be trying to market yourself as somebody that thinks a particular thing it's working or not working, right? That's it's not supposed to be identity, because once it becomes your identity, it's very hard for you to change. So that was his argument, and he brought out examples of like BlackBerry, if I'm not mistaken, Billy, right? If you remember the BlackBerry case where Apple, I think all of us knows about this particular story about Apple being taking over the smartphone story. And in fact, he brought in some inside views about Steve Jobs. At first were not very happy with uh, iPhone, because he doesn't really want to deal with the phone companies, because they think that with all the contracts and all that, they will be manipulated by the phone companies. But eventually he went ahead, and he understood that it's not very easy for us to be in the scientist mode, because even the world-renowned scientists can be caught into that position. So one example that he quoted was Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was, probably the greatest the greatest scientist, right, for the past century on physics. But one thing that he did miss was on quantum mechanics. If you know Albert Einstein very well, he continued to dismiss quantum mechanics for his entire life, even though that quantum mechanics stuff is actually developing. So even for people like Albert Einstein can be caught into some of our mode, right? Like preacher or prosecutor. So if you ask me honestly, after reading the book, it's not easy. Like I see some of the comments here, right? This method might not work when you argue with your wife. I definitely agree. But let's try ourselves to rethink some of our position. And one of the factors that could contribute into what we do not know, what we don't know, what we don't know, right? It's that I'm not sure how many of you have heard about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Give me a yes or no in the chat box. Any one of you have heard the Dunning-Kruger effect? Okay, no. Okay, that's heard of the term, forgot what it means. Yeah, it always happens to me. Okay, yes, right, Dunning-Kruger effect. So this effect is actually being discovered by the two psychologists named with the last name of Dunning and Kruger. So what they say is that sometimes, right, we overestimate our ability and knowledge on a certain stuff, and this will be very prevalent, especially on the topic where probably if you have zero knowledge on that particular topic, you won't probably experience that Dunning-Kruger effect. But once you move along that progress, you learn something about a particular topic, and then you reach what they call the Mount Stupid, right? Like you think you know a lot, but actually you know very little. And if you ask me personally, right, I felt like during this pandemic, a lot of people have achieved this, the peak of Mount Stupid. Sorry to say that, just because they read a few articles in Google, they read a few articles in Facebook, they think they know everything about the pandemic. So this is a very very interesting effect that I think all of us have to keep in mind, that we should always be very vigilant about what we do not know. And Billy, how about you? Do you think you are actually being trapped by this Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah, you just now bring up the competency, right? You say you don't know that you don't know, you don't know that you know, and so on, right? There's four level of competency. And then I felt that at point we really need to slow down and ask ourselves what we really don't know. And how to do it. I think in learning, there's a one proven way how they do is that always quiz yourself about the things that you think you know, and then you will not stuck, and at least you will not stuck at this norm or stupid for a very long time.
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of you, especially, I think throughout the research, right, something that is on top of the book, they didn't really mention of the book, but it's on top of the Dunning-Kruger effect, is that uh, they they kind of did a basic research about, usually who will be, kind of, have this particular effect. It's usually the economists, the doctors, the scientists, and from my personal experience, the engineers, right? Because the economists, why? Because the economists always thinks that they have one grand theory for everything in the world. So let's say they talk about supply and demand, right? Theory. So they will have that particular theory and apply it to every situation in the world, and they think they know everything. That's why when you deep delve into the topic of Dunning-Kruger, you will realize that uh, there's always a debate between economists and psychologists, because economists always want to find that grand theory to unify everything. Psychologists always tailor each particular case to a particular situation. And I always heard this complaint from my group of doctors friends. They will claim that the biggest crowd they do not like to visit is engineers, because engineers always think that they know everything. I'm not really shooting anybody here. I have been in engineering for almost 10 years. I graduated with an engineering degree. But the very problem is that a lot of them will come to their clinic and then they will say that I read this article in Google, I have this friend that told me about this, and they will counterfact, their argument on the medical device, right? Even though people have been studying, 10, 20 years on a particular topic, just because they know a little bit about everything, they reach that Mount Stupid, and then they kind of, overrun whatever advice that is being given by the doctor. So a lot of them are amused because they were like, if you don't trust me, why are you here in the very first place? Well, this is up for debate, right? Some people will say that, I'm actually counter check the doctors, but this is what I heard from my group of friends. So sadly, engineers, we like data and we like logics, and a lot of times we can be the logic bully that Adams talks about. Okay, so the other thing that Adam really emphasized in this book is that learning really requires the humility to realize that one has something to learn. And he talks about imposter syndrome in particular, Billy, if you remember, that a lot of people, they thought that imposter syndrome is something that is not really that good, because I'm not sure about you, but I always have this imposter syndrome in any roles that I've been in. No matter how long I've been in a particular role at work, I always feel like I'm not qualified to be there. So that's like the imposter syndrome. But he mentioned that imposter syndrome sometimes can be very helpful, because it kind of give you the mindset that you still have a lot of things to learn. Whereas on the other side of the zone is what they call the armchair quarterback syndrome, where a particular person, right, has more confidence than competence. And I'm sure that in any organization, not only in Intel, you will find this type of people where they equate confidence with competence, right? So what he's trying to preach is that, not to trying to preach, maybe not the right word, right? The trying to ask us to rethink. It's how do we position ourselves in the so-called confident humility zone, right? We always have this, struggle between whether you are having an imposter syndrome or armchair quarterback syndrome. But what Adam is trying to ask us to rethink, it's really something in the middle, right? That you don't equate confidence with competence, and you constantly acknowledge that there's always something new for you to learn. And just to give you an example, in that book, in the very start of that book, right, he quoted an example of a fireman in the forest fire, right, Billy? That was a very interesting story that I read. So what happened is that usually in the US, you know that there are a lot of forest fire, right? That will happen everywhere. So there was one occasion where the firemen went into a forest fire and it got so serious that they have to retreat. they have to retreat. And there was this particular person that managed to save his life because he put down all the gears, right? All the gears that was actually slowing him down. But majority of the firemen were killed in the fire because they were not rethinking the situation, right? Because for a few reasons. That's not what they are being taught to leave behind the gears and run for life, right? And the other thing is that because the gears and firemen, they have tied the gears with the fireman's identity. So if you put down your gears, it's like you are admitting to the whole world that you're incompetent and you are running for your life. So that two major factors um, cost a lot of firemen's life. And they did a study over the years, and they realized that, yeah, those that carried the gears, well, they are trying to run away, eventually got killed in the fire. Way frequent than those people that left their gears and run for their life. So that was another kind of confident humility zone that caused you to rethink. And the other interesting fact is that the other thing that Adam found that needs rethink is that sometimes not every forest fire that you have to go in and rush to save the fire. So previously in the previous year in the US, I believe they have a particular I couldn't remember exact the details. It's in the book. Like you have to save the forest fire within a allocated time slot. So you have like you notice a forest fire, you have to send a group of people to go and save it, even though whether the forest fire is going to cause damage to the property or is going to kill people. You don't care, you just go and save, right? And you realize that this approach has to be rethink because by doing that, you are putting a lot of people into danger, and not every forest fire demands a 24 hours closure. So that was pretty interesting to me. I'm not sure whether Billy, do you find that interesting, or any other story that you think will resonate with some of the things that we talk about here?
I felt the fireman story is that there's one case where one of the firemen actually burn the grass around them to create, I think they call it a safe zone or something like that, and that fella just lie down on that zone, and that really need to spark things that we might not need to do things as what we have done before, but really slow down and think and see things from different perspective to see what else can be done. I mean, what else can be done, and don't limit to the possibility. And for sure, the one that I mentioned about also have time to strip off our identity from whatever that we think. I just shared with you just now, right? And we always say that as the parents, we are the teachers to our children. And if you see very carefully, actually, we are not born as a parents naturally. Parents are being trained or being learned. And I say in the hindsight, children are also our teacher per se. So I feel that just don't too clinch on the general identity that what people gave to us, but to see what can we learn from that stuff. And also, and for the forest one is how to unlearn things that we should do things something much more creatively or differently from what we think we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very good example. If you ask me how to tie some of this concept personally, two things. In terms of work, we always have what we call the BKM, right? In Intel, I always have this objection to the word BKM. Personally, I think it's not the right word to use. Should call it CUM, commonly used method. It shouldn't be called as best known method, because when you call something as best, it doesn't require rethink. You get what I mean? Like best. Well, why do you need to work on something that is already best? BKM, best known method, right? It's not. Then throughout your Intel career, you realize that the so-called BKM is not the best. It's just something that people commonly use that helps to kind of streamline your work, right? But it's not necessarily the best, and a lot of times you will find a better way of doing what they call the BKM. So that's what I found at work that I think requires rethink. We should drop the word BKM. We should use probably CUM, right? Commonly used method. Commonly used, not best, just commonly used, right? And the other thing I agree with you on the parenting part. the rethink is very important because before I have my first child, everybody will act like preacher, right, to tell you what's the best for your child, and then they will scare you with facts and data. They will scare you with their personal story, and then you realize that none of the method that being recommended by your friend works because every child is different, right? So I continue to relearn and rethink during my parenthood, and I'm sure a lot of parents here are so as well. So if we can use the same concept at different areas of our life, I think that will be very important. So besides talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect, these are some of the highlights that I think I'm not able to cover every chapter in this particular book, but these are some of the things of me what I identified that they are quite interesting arguments, right? So the first thing is about the joy of being wrong. Joy of being wrong. I think a lot of times we do not like to be wrong, me included. When you're being wrong, you feel awful. But what Adam realized throughout his connection and relationship is that a lot of the greatest scientists in the world, for example, he quoted Daniel Kahneman when he presented one of Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winner on decision making, right? And when he talked to him, right, sometimes what Adam presented represents a counter argument view of what Daniel wrong. And so whenever he talks to Daniel, Daniel said that he's very happy that he's being proven wrong because that is something that will help to further refine his theory and his argument. So a lot of times, us we don't like being wrong, especially in the corporate environment, right? But if you look at a lot of successful culture, especially in the creativity culture, right? In Google X, there's actually a day where they celebrate. They call it the Celebrate Failure Day, where everybody will go into the stage and kind of present what they have discovered and on the field project and what they have learned, particularly for their next effort and encounter. So I think that's a very good kind of way for us to preach, not to say we preach to exercise in our organization, because we can't be right all the time, right? And especially on areas, of course, in terms of areas that you requires execution and quality, like product quality, there's not much leeway for us to allow error. But I do believe that in some part of our journey of becoming a better person or a better at work, right? There's always we should definitely not to say celebrate failure, but be open about failure, right? Probably in your bi-weekly staff meeting, right? You can talk about what we have learned session for half an hour, and you get everybody to present. And I personally felt, if you ask me on the personal view on this particular topic, is that I think the manager can role model instead of asking, "Hey Billy, anything fail this week? Can share." You start by sharing your own failure or your own misstep, and then you get people to talk about it, so that it becomes a very healthy organization that people know what has not been done right and what are the next steps that they are going to do to fix it, right? And the other good argument is about the good fight club. According to Adam, he said that the absence of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy. Apathy means that nobody give care about any topic that you discuss. So a lot of times this is very true. If you know me personally, in every organization I join, I can be very vocal. Not because I want to stir the what's already been cooking, right? But I always felt like the reason you hire me is because you want to hear from me, right? It's not for me to echo what you say. So I really resonate with this. The absence of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy. So the moment that I stop talking, I've stopped giving new opinions, is the moment that I don't really care anymore. So a lot of people will observe that, and then they will realize that after a few months, I switched team. So try your best to encourage conversation in a good way. I think if you have worked with the Israel team before, they are really good at that. Uh, I think every conversation, if you ask me, it sounds like a conflict to us, but because their culture has been always confronting the data and the facts. I think in Malaysia, probably, we are pretty, how do I say, courteous. We don't want to challenge people. But in this book, they actually recommend to build a challenge network, not just a support network. It's good, right? You build a people of supporters that always say, "Oh, great, Billy, your idea is great. Book club always great, great, great. Don't no need improvement. I like it. I love it. Every meetup event is good." But you never learn, right? So I think this is what they preach, um, and frame the what you should do according to Adam is that frame the disagreement as a debate, so people take it intellectually instead of being a personal opinion. And I think he quoted some examples, Billy, if you remember some of the examples that we'll bring up for us to on the next topic, which is how to win debate and influence people. If you read that book, right, they talk about a session where one of the world best debater debates another person on whether it's good to allocate government funds to support preschool schooling. Should preschool schooling be free for every country? And then what they realize is that at the middle of the book, spoiler alert, right? He's actually debating a system, AI system, where the AI system has probably a huge database to back up all the claims with data and all that. But eventually, the human debater managed to raise the agreement of his view from I think about 10% to 30%. He didn't win the debate, but he managed to sway the view on preschool by providing a few points on how to frame a particular debate and stuff. So one of the things that they kind of presented in this book, in order for you to win a debate, is not to present a lot of reasons to a certain people. Just present one or two particular reasons that you can focus on, because research has shown that when you give multiple reasons to a particular people, they tend to be very defensive instead of focusing on one or 2 points. And they also brought in this book, they also brought some discussion about football clubs, right? Baseball club and football clubs. Baseball club, I'm not sure whether all of you are familiar with Red Sox and the Yankees and all that. But he gave an example like the Manchester United club that he implemented. How do you get these two groups of fans to talk to each other, right? Because to him, football or baseball club supporters are the hardest people to change their mind. For example, like, let's say you are a Manchester United supporter, and I ask you to go and support Liverpool club. It's almost close to impossible, right? It's like asking you to change your religion, I guess. So what happened is that in this book, he did give a few points on how do you influence people on some point. So instead of giving reasons to people like why should you support Liverpool or why should you support Manchester United, I think the best way that they have researched was that to ask people how circumstances leads to a belief. So what they did in the research was that they are trying to kind of talk through these two group of people to imagine. Let's say I don't think it's applicable for Malaysia but let's say in the UK, right? Because you are born in Manchester United and you are being raised in that particular city and you supported your home club, seems small, right? So that's the circumstances that you cannot control that led to a belief that Manchester United is probably the best club in the world. The same goes to Liverpool club. So when they have this discussion about how circumstances, like for example, being born in the city leads to your belief, it helps to kind of find that common ground that people have on this particular topic. So I guess this can be a powerful tool for us to kind of talk about debates and influencing people. So instead of telling people why they are wrong, why I'm right, try to preach how a particular circumstances lead to a belief instead of using counter arguments that we used to have. And the other thing that he talks about is also about vaccine. Billy, I'm not sure whether you remember, but but it's not related to COVID. I think that's still too new to be included in the book. But he did talk about I think it's a measles vaccine, where there are some anti-vaccination group that is very tough on their decision not to vaccine their child. And through some research, they found out ways to kind of influence people to rethink their position, right? So some of the method that they kind of preach is to practice the art of persuasive listening. So increase your question to statement ratio. A lot of time when we try to persuade people, we give a lot of argument and statement instead of a question. So I think that's what he would recommend us to do. And the second thing will be on ask how people will originally form an opinion. So instead of asking why you choose not to vaccinate your child, that can be very defensive, turn into a very defensive discussion. Ask people how they come up with that particular viewpoint. So perhaps in order to influence people that do not like to be vaccinated, right? Ask them, like, how do you manage to form this particular opinion? Is it through some articles that you read, some stories that your friend has? And then ask this question: what evidence would change your mind? Instead of asking, how can I change your mind? You put it on as a third party view. What evidence that will exist that will change your mind, right? Probably, of course, some people will say no, never, right? There will be no evidence that will change my mind. These are the people that probably won't be able to. You will be spending your lifetime to convince. But there are definitely some people that will tell you, yeah, maybe what, if government can provide us some data, or some association can provide us with some data that will help us to understand more about vaccine. There could be certain people, and then try to acknowledge a common ground. So when I say that, it's that. So for example, like when people are very anti-vaccine, they have some concerns like probably the side effect is going to cause people illness and all that. Instead of diminishing some of the claim, you have to acknowledge that if it's true lah, acknowledge some of the common ground that that you think it makes sense, right? So for example, like usually a conversation between two football club will be football club supporter will be much smoother if like all of us acknowledge some certain weakness on the team lah. That's how I felt. So the same argument can kind of be applied in all sorts of influencing effort, right? And then last but not least, give the freedom of choice back to the people that you're talking to. Instead of asking him or she, right, like you must vaccine your child, right? Just give back the respect, their autonomy, and tell them that it's your choice to do that, and let them make the decision, right? I think that's probably some of the key points that I have captured. It's not all, but some of the interesting key points that I have captured. So Billy, how about you? What do you find is to be the most interesting part of the book?
Okay, Shin Chze, thanks for sharing all that, right? So I just wanted to re-emphasize again that I think this book quite good for us to have some tips and stuff like that. And back to your point, the joy of being wrong. I did have this reflection, the joy of being wrong. We always say that we wanted to learn from our mistake or other people's failure and so on. How can we overcome that one? But I felt the first way for us to learn from the mistake is first to acknowledge that is the mistake, that is the failure, and then have the open mind for us to act upon and probably ask the better question, what can be improved in this thing, or probably talk about how can that be improved. I think that is a very good one too. And you mentioned about how to win debates and influence people. I think for the last part of this on the vaccination part interview, I think what he do is that also associate the particular good traits of that mother who refused to get his children to be vaccinated. They say, hey, I will not say which decision that you need to make, but as a responsible and a good mother, you will make the best choice for your children. And probably that also one thing that we can use in our communication and stuff. We cannot say, hey, Shin Chze, you need to go and eat McDonald's because McDonald's is the best. But we give them and say, hey, McDonald's provide this thing, and it go with the question that, hey, do you wanted to try it yourself, and let that person to give idea, right? So like idea why he should try or why he should not try. Yep. Yeah, this is a free one to add, but it's a very good thing, and probably Shin Chze, you want to hear if it's any question from the other folks?
Yeah, before we go to the question, right, I saw there are some questions coming in. There are a few tips at the end of the book. If you don't have the time, you think that whatever I summarize is good enough. Of course, I will, as a book club, sharer, I always encourage people to read the book.
Yep.
But if you think that you don't have the time, you can just jump straight to some of the. At the end of the book, there are some recommendations about what do you have to do, and a few things that really resonates with me is that throw out a 10-year plan. I think in that particular book, he talked about successful super forecaster that kind of forecast the election result between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And he talked about how all the super forecaster that is really good always rethinks their position. And they are not ashamed to say that, I don't think Donald Trump will win 3 months ago, but I think he will definitely win now because of the new data that I have received. So the thing about the 10-year plan that I always very resist on a personal basis is that a lot of times you go into a conversation with your manager, and then your manager will tell you, what do you plan to do 5 years from now? I always don't believe that plan of now, because a 1-year plan makes sense, but a 5-year plan, to be honest, in 5 years I've changed 3 careers that I never thought. So for me personally, I don't think it's a very good suggestion to have a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan. And the other question that Adam said you should not really ask your kid is that, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because that kind of question limits their growth mindset. And this is something that I really take from the book, is that I shouldn't really ask my 2-year-old kid, right? Or when he grows up, like, what do you want to be in the grow up? Because I always get this constant question, right? As a Asian kid, your Asian parents, what do you want to do? Then the answer will always be either doctor, engineer, lawyer, or a loser lah. So yeah, and I always think that it's, when you ask people about what do you want to be or grow up, you tie a person to an identity, and then there will be no space for a growth mindset. Okay, so last but not least, I think if you like Adam Grant after reading his book, feel free to follow his podcast. I think it's a very well crafted podcast, very related to work life. If you are interested, it's free. Just subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast platform that you are familiar with. With that, I think that's all from my sharing. Let's kind of address some of the questions here. I think there's one talking about, okay, how do we create discussion and debate with people that have different trains of thought? Billy, you want to help me on that?
Oh my god, you are so good in this.
We call PowerPoint. PowerPoint, I point to you, right?
I always think that this is also like, I always have this problem one. No, but you say that we are right or they are wrong. So I felt that there's one thing that like what I say, think like a scientist, right? When you say think like a scientist, we always refer to the facts. But bear in mind, in this world, there are someone, I quote like my father, they would not like the facts. And I always say that how to debate, I think it's all based on us, is that what is our expectation out from the debate. I think that's number one. What is our objective to do on that debate? And of course, there's a tricks being shared by Adams in the book. I would say that the first thing is to look at your expectation. What is that? And do you have ways for you to move towards that one? I think if you did do that, and out of all the time that until now, I think to become a scientist doesn't give you the truth. To be a scientist, it brings you nearer to the truth. And what I say that sometimes people wanted to change, sometimes people just take time to change. And as what they say that it is possible to wake up a sleeping person, but it is impossible to wake up a person who are pretending to sleep. So I might not have the right tricks there, but it's more to yourself. What you felt is your expectation. I think that boils down to, if you have this thought. I do not know have the right answer for that question.
Yeah, if you were ask me to tie back to the book, right, Billy, on the debate, I think the author brought up the Al Gore inconvenient truth kind of story. Remember where Al Gore, the former vice president of the United States, came to talk about a very impactful presentation that talked about climate change. And in the end, even though it was very impactful, shared by millions, climate change is still only believed by probably 30% of the whole United States of residents of the United States. So what I would suggest from that book is that when you come to a debate on a certain topic, right, a lot of us like to frame it like either you are right or I'm right, like a binary switch at 1 and 0. But a lot of topics in this book, the author also kind of emphasize on complex matters shouldn't be discussed into a kind of like a switch lah. Either you are right or I'm right. You should always try to complexify contagious topics. So the back to that climate change, because our goal argument was like, if you don't support climate change, you are an idiot, or you are a loser, right? And that became, one of the reasons why that movement didn't really caught up, because people are being framed that way. I think in the United States, right, it's the same as Republican and Democrats. You see, like, the politics is being so polarized that you are a Democrat, you must have a certain capability, characteristic. If you are a Republican, you must have a certain characteristic. But in fact, a lot of people, they don't exist in like 1 or 0. Like, I can be a Democrat, but some of my thinking can be conservative, right? So I think to answer that question, let's try not to simplify a particular topic that has only A or B answer. We should try to tackle a particular topic from multiple angles instead of making it yes or no. And I see some comments about best known methods. Thanks for the clarification. I think it makes sense. The word known, right, on the emphasis. But just my personal view, a lot of times, all these best known method never change for many years. So I'm just trying to bring up, like, we sometimes we have to rethink what BKM is really all about. But yeah, good point on the BKM.
Thanks. And Gian, let me add something. So I remember, when the so-called the manager sessions, right? So Adam Grant actually touched on the, you mentioned about challenge network, right? So one thing that he point out is a disagreeable giver mindset, right? So I think it's related to the debates here, right? So when every time we wanted to kind of convince people, first thing you need to really let people know that the feedback that you provided is actually trying to make things better. It's not for yourself to win, right? You need to act as a disagreeable giver, right? So when you speak, your ideas or your influence, the feedback is basically you wanted to make he or she a better person, to make the idea better, instead of to show that you are better, to show that you are really trying to win, right? I think this is probably one of the concept that he has been continue to share as well.
Yeah, and I always, whenever I enter a discussion or even like a sharing here, right, my point is not to convince you like Adam Grant is the best person in the world to talk about this topic, or this is the best book. My objective is always about sparking an argument instead of seeking convert. That's a different, right? A lot of times when we talk about certain topic, we want to seek convert, but for me, it's always about sparking an argument. I think you're right on that particular sense, and I think it's not easy because people don't quite like to hear why they are wrong, right?
It is difficult. I mean, at least, if somebody give me the feedback, right? If I have the the understanding as he's actually trying to help me to be a better person, then I would accept it. But when I feel the comment is like it's really trying to trying to win over my conversations and it's really not helping me, and then I become defensive, right? So then the conversation is going to be getting tougher and tougher. So
And
I think that challenge network culture is very interesting.
Yeah, and I saw a question on how do you handle conflict management with managers and how do you have agree to disagree, right? Okay, for the first question, this book unfortunately didn't touch much of how to handle conflict management, but Adam did had one message: never agree to disagree, never. And this has been emphasized a lot in the book. I think this is something that we always practice in Intel lah. Disagree and commit. So which is probably a little bit different, but a lot of times we will just okay lah, agree to disagree because we don't want to continue or drag the meeting or something like that, right? And then all our voices will be drowned down. I have not reached that particular leadership position that I have to say that I have a lot of experience of managing that. That's not my expertise, right? But if you ask me as an employee reporting to a particular manager, I would love a time where being allocated is all about discussing topics that we don't have to rush through an agenda. A lot of times, right? Very, very funny when you see a staff meeting and then you're allocated 50 minutes to present your idea and ask for feedback. And when you present the idea, it's already 30 minutes, and then 2 minutes you talk about feedback. And then because when one person gave a feedback, right, and then the other person tried to counter or start a conversation, oh, sorry, you don't have time already, let's move on to the next agenda. I think this is very wrong for me personally. Again, I'm representing my personal opinion. We shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Oh, how here? Sorry to chip in.
Yeah.
Being the Intel veteran, I must say that there may be some a little bit this misunderstanding about this agree and commit concept. The gist of the disagree and commit is allow the diverse opinion to be shared and debated. And you get to the point that you have a different opinion because sometimes you just don't know which way to go. But each of the people in the meeting were expected to share their viewpoint and bring their data, but with key decisions, sometimes you just don't know which way to go to. But once all data being discussed, then only we make a decision. But at that point, we will move forward together as a team. That is the gist of not saying that I don't have a point, they don't listen to me, whatever lah, you go lah. That is very different spirits, which I think that I will still go. I think that there are different contexts. I joined late. I don't know what's the book, but I need to defend this again, commit philosophy.
Yeah. I mean that's the whole point of this book, right? Rethinking and sparking a conversation. Thanks, Kokao. I think you as I said, as my disclaimer, I'm not in that management position sometimes to see things differently, right? So I mean that's probably a reason why we have to do that. And I do see some of the comments like I kind of agree, like managers has to be a decision maker, has to be accountable for his or her decision, right? So I think that's very important. Speaking from an employee point of view, of course, in the end, we have to make a commitment and move forward, right? We can't be just discussing all the time and rethinking all the time. So being the accountability of a manager on a particular decision will be very crucial. So a lot of times I see sadly in the corporate world is that yes, manager makes a decision, but when things goes wrong, in the end, it was attributed to other person. I'm not saying anyone here, right? But I'm just quoting, some examples that, sometimes it happens. So the trust between the employee.
I feel hurt.
Yeah.
I feel hurt.
Hey, come on. I'm not saying that, but I'm sure that, a lot of managers here have sufficient training and experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is SB here. I think I also joined late like Kokao. Sorry, I didn't really hear everything.
Oh no, SB is my former manager.
Example was, I mean, Shin Chze is, you know my style. I think. I think all of us, I think, should ask can challenge all the code, which is really important. It's just that how we phrase the question. I think Tang just mentioned right just now. I hear. Some people would just started with the word why are you doing this, why you're doing that, why you're doing that. It's just like you're asking from your kids, So definitely the people that even though it's very patient listener, you will get defensive. So I would suggest that instead the art of skill, even though you can be very defensive, or you can challenge, you can ask questions, but put it into the right question, people will feel more acceptable to listen and get the feedback. This first one.
Yeah.
And second example from my experience, Shin Chze, you just mentioned, right? A lot of time we all have the very fixed schedule agenda for the meeting. So you're giving 30 minutes, for example. Just now you say you don't have a time because of that overshoot that you don't have chance to get the feedback. In fact, I will actually strongly encourage all of you. If you don't believe that your presentation can finish within the 20 minutes time, 15 minutes time, and leave 15 minutes, ask for 1 hour, or ask for 2 hours, or ask for 3 hours for your presentation. That is the right thing. And it's also say that, hey, I give you 30 minutes and you have to fix it in the 30 minutes. If you don't believe, and you believe you want to have 3 hours conversation, why not? I'm sure you ask that.
SB, the other one that I would suggest is for proposal is don't go for the formal meeting and expect feedback. For know your audience is very important. Yep. You do the one-on-one with the people who likely will be the strong influencer in the decision meeting or proposal meeting. Yep. Go with them first. Then you get a supporter in the meeting. Don't wait until the 30 minutes. There's no such thing called proposal approved in 30 minutes, to my understanding. It's very always hours.
I fully agree. And then this is always we do. You know, when you're gaming into the 30 minutes, you must understand what is the agenda for. If the agenda is for you to get approval, expectation, you already done all the work before that. But if you say you're going to 3 hours conversation, then you can, because you don't have any talk to any stakeholder. But just bear in mind, your 3 hours, even they give you, doesn't necessarily you'll get approved. Yeah, because you haven't done your prep work already.
Since probably we need to arrange 3 hours to talk to SB.
Hey, I think that's the point, right, of rethinking, right? I mean, again, as I said, there's no one switch that fixes it all. And I mean, SB managed me before. He knows my style, right? And I have to comment, even though sometimes me and SB have a lot of disagreement, but he's always very open to what I say. And I think it's not to kind of label every manager in Intel that way. It's really about, trying to hear. It's good like we hear the perspective of the manager, right? Like you can't be presenting to a VP and expect 3 hours, right? But I think here is also a safe platform for us to kind of give our employee viewpoint. I think one of the things that I always debate, probably together with SB as well, since he's here, he can vouch for me, is a lot of times I think managers like to say this word, don't give me problem, give me solution. You always heard this kind of problem statement, right? I'm not saying SB is that. SB always very open for me to discuss problem and solution. I'm just quoting some of the examples. And I think this is, for me personally, this is not very accurate. Because not all the problem we have solutions, right? The very reason we want to bring to the lineup of the team, we wanted to discuss as a team on how do we solve that problem. But of course, if 10 of the arguments I made, 10 is all about problem, there's something wrong about me. But you can't expect 10 of the problem argument that I made and you expect 10 I have the solutions. I'm sorry, I can't do that, right? Because that's the reason why we have a team discussion. So I think managers should, if you ask me, the rethinking part is not to focus too much on just the solution. Ask exactly, because problem definition, I don't know who quoted that, right? Albert Einstein, it's like 90% of the whole process of understanding the problem. So I think the solution versus problem argument, we have to kind of balance it. Not every problem I bring to the table has a solution. I don't know whether, some managers probably want to.
I have a different opinion on that one.
Sure.
Yeah. So I do it on purpose. Not say that I disagree, but again, just to try the different perspective, since I being labeled as a manager in these cases. One is, of course, we don't expect answer to every question. Maybe two input. First is why you bring your managers into a discussion where he's not needed or when you see that he's not value add. Second is you may not have the answer, but always do the homework. You don't have an answer, but you want to go in and say that I have option and alternative, that this is pro and cons. I want to hear for your feedback, which direction we should pursue. Then the conversation become more effective. Do your homework before solving the problem. You don't need to have answer to all the question, but you need to have an option or at least some framework, or there are two things that I want to do, but each of them require a lot of effort, which I can't. I only pick one. There's the pros and cons of option 1 and 2.
Okay, great point, Kohan. But again, we don't have options for all the problems we presented. That's what I'm trying to say. But I get your point. At least do our homework before we present something, right? Not
Right.
to just say, hey, this is not working without any, further elaboration, right? And then at least,
Yes.
come in and identify who can help you. How do you plan as the next step, right? If you do not know the next step, who do you think that will be able to chip in to help you? What are the help needed? Be very clear on that, right? Instead of just coming in with like a problem statement. But I think, probably the book didn't really touch much on that, but I think this is a healthy discussion that causes us to rethink our employee and manager perspective. I think both it's kind of constant evolving. And I always love Kok Hao and SB conversation. I know Kok Hao for years. We started all this book club for some time, and thanks Kok Hao and SB for the. I think Kiet Sing also quite active to give the opinion. I think I think it's very important for us to identify our roles and sometimes have that challenge network, as if you tie back to the book, right? To kind of challenge. I still felt like our Asian community can sometimes be too nice. In a sense, we want to maintain the harmony of the team, right? But it's not easy, it's our culture, So step by step. I'm not saying that the Western way is the best, but I think we should adopt some of the good points.
And Chze is a journey, right? So just like identity, I think you always identify yourself and someone reporting to someone. I think it's also time for you to see if you are SB, how would you look at this issue?
Yeah.
I mean, the identity was one thing that I see in common.
Yeah. And
so,
okay. So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm nothing. Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking, don't tie your opinion into your identity, That's a very risky thing to do. And then once you tie that in, right, you will never admit that you're wrong,
That's why I think
opinion is just opinion, right? Just throw it out as a work kind of, deliverables. But I don't want to be identify myself as Shin Chze as the one that think XXX doesn't work. So forever people will tie me with that identity, and I will defend my viewpoint till the death and won't rethink it. I'm not saying that I achieved that nirvana stage yet. A lot of times, majority of time, I still fall into the trap. I think most of us are. But I think the book is a good reminder for us to kind of rethink. And of course, you will come back with a debate like, how much rethink is the rethink, right? You can't be rethinking forever, right? So I think that's, as every theory in the world, there's always bound to be the other side of the coin. So just my personal viewpoint is that if you have not been rethinking anything, let's have a rethink scorecard. I myself, for example, a lot of times are very reluctant to talk to my insurance friend because even before I spark the conversation, I think they are trying to sell me something. But probably it can be my good, right? But I always have this mindset I never rethink. Whenever they call me anything, I will just reject. Maybe I should be more open. I know that's my personal perspective, right? I have always this bias, reject them right out, even not hearing a word from them. So I urge all of you to kind of think of a few things that you hold well to your belief that you have not been challenging it for some time. Think about it, whether it's something that is right or wrong, or sometimes it can be changed depending on situation. That's all the last message that I would love to spark a conversation, not to say give, or I'm not qualified to do that, but spark a conversation in this group to rethink, right, on the matters in life. Yeah.
Shin Chze, I just renewed my insurance policy 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, good for your whoever your friend or families that helped you with that.
It's mostly family, so
okay,
but you're right, because I've been as your point is, I've been trying to not talking and reviewing my policy because I thought it's always sufficient. But as we grow responsibility, as I learned about particular incident that could happen to us, I think it changed your mindset, right? But I think that insurance is a good example. And it's always the trade-off. As I increase the premium, that means that I need to do a trade-off in somewhere else. The question is, which one is actually higher value for you at this point that you're willing to put your money on? Like I put, let's say, another 100 on my insurance premium. That means I may need to cut down some food for $100 to keep that balance. As an example. Or should I cut down somewhere to have that increase because the resource is always abundant? So that rethink is an exercise I just did about maybe a month ago.
Great. Thanks for the sharing, Kok Hao. I'm not sure who else have some.
Yeah, Kok Hao thought you'd rethink because you are, rich enough. So.
Hey, that can cause us to rethink, to change our car or house.
yeah. It could be also rethink that why you are not as rich as you think you are. Right? Let me share the example which I had a conversation with my family members for a long time. I always tell them that you got to believe that you are a billionaire. I'm a billionaire. Now, the question of course they say, why you say so? Because I say that I am sure that if someone offer $1 billion to me in exchange of my life, or my family members, or in exchange of my parents' life, I'll say no. And they are with me right now. I'm enjoying the value of that relationship and their presence. I think that I'm as rich as a billionaire, and that's the thinking of price versus value. I just want to share with you that all of you who have the time to listen to this book club, listen to Shin Chze, you are already a billionaire, a rich person, and you have a job.
I should ask you to write my marketing pitch, Kok Hao. But again, I think I'm just speaking from my personal experience, and my understanding of the book. Everybody can reread the book to have their own understanding, and I wish you all happy reading. I hope I can spark your interest in this book.
And Caesar, to end this, probably the last question to you is that if you would recommend anyone to read Adam's book of Think Again, who would it be and why?
Wow, why you never prep me on this question? I don't have a quick answer, to be very frank. I will give it to myself again. Despite me talking so openly about all the things that I've shared here, I can tell you I didn't follow 70% of what I preach in this conversation. I'm just sharing Adam's thought. Because it's hard. It's extremely hard to admit that you are wrong, to rethink your position. And as myself, I have been rethinking my career so many times, juggling different roles. That is something that I felt like I have done, at least, to my own expectation of rethinking about my life. But the other aspect of my life, not so much. Like when raising my kid, I'm still stuck with my old, how my dad raised me kind of format. Even in, a lot of things in life, right? Like, biases towards certain investment product, biases towards certain type of people. I still couldn't kind of get rid of that. So I will continue to reread this book and, have a conversation with the people in this club, right? To remind myself, hey, Shin Chze, you shared this, but you're not practicing this. And I will be glad to be held accountable. And not to say accountable, too serious of a word, like a reminder, right, of what I've shared here to rethink about my life.
That is all the end of today's sharing. I hope that you learned something that you can implement in whatever that you are doing, and enjoy the book Think Again by Adam Grant. Do remember to subscribe to the Tang Book Club channel, and do check out the videos that I posted here. See you again in our next video. Happy learning!